The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television.
Welcome to another special episode of Compass as we celebrate the Great American Read in cooperation with PBS. I'm Les Heen. The Great American Read celebrates America's most loved books, and there are a great many books out there that, of course, people have told us that they love. Well, there's a national list now of 100 books, and folks have a chance to go to pbs.org and read through it. While there'll be a lot of discussions across the nation, we at Pioneer are talking about some local discussions about books, and with us now for that discussion, we have with us Sheila Tabaka. Sheila is the professor of theater and a costume designer at Southwest Minnesota State University. Sheila is also artistic director for the SMSU Children's Theater. And she was featured in an episode of Pioneer's production of Postcards for her work in costume design. Also with us we have John Drazel, and John is an English teacher, West Central Area High School. And I'm glad to have both of them here. He's also the author of a blog titled Stuff I Assign My Students. I love that blog title, John. Great fun. You also got some other great descriptions on your blog, but when I saw that it was stuff that you assign your students, I thought, oh, we got to have Johnny in to talk about books.
Well, if I could only write one, that would be even better.
So, struggling author added to the list as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, John, I know you've looked at the list for the Great American Read, and as I looked at that list, I thought, I bet John is finding some books on here that he loves to teach. And that's got to be challenging, teaching literature into high school kids. But what did you find on the list?
Well, one of the first things I did was try to figure out how many of them I've read, and I have not read many of them. I've started a lot of them. I guess a couple of them that are on the list are The Outsiders,
sure.
which just seems to be a timeless book. Why 50 years after that thing was written, it just doesn't wear out. And also, I was glad to see that the Hatchet series was on. That's one of those that, especially with boys who are struggling readers or reluctant readers, and that's a great book, and it's on the list, and I've gotten to teach it.
So The Outsiders and the Hatchet series, so we have someone at home saying, okay, how can I get kids interested in books? Those are a couple of things you found that can really be good?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's so many. I mean, Twilight's on there. And of course, as an English teacher, I'm absolutely required to poo-poo that. But at the same time, it's about 1,000-page book, and there's three of them in the series, and they were devoured. So why am I so crabby about it?
And I think that's kind of a change, isn't it? And what we've seen in how English is taught or how reading is taught is that there was at one point at schools that say this is the list and this is what you must do, but now it seems to have transformed to what is someone going to find interesting and get them to engage that way?
As we've taken a look at how people read books, we've tried to give students the same chance to read books the way adults do them. They get together in groups. They have, obviously we can't serve wine and cheese in the third grade classroom, but they get together with a group of people and discuss the book, and some of them have read it all and are ready to discuss every minutia of it, and some of them have read 2 or 3 chapters. There's no test, but it gets people reading and thinking about reading. And even if you've read just 2 chapters of the book, that's more than nothing.
Sure. Sheila, I want to bring you into this conversation because I know last fall we traveled to Marshall, and you were there in Marshall at an event for banned books, because Banned Book Week comes up every year in the fall. And of course there are books on this list that have either been banned or challenged. So what did you learn from that experience you had with Banned Book Week at the library in Marshall?
So I think that one of the things that really came out of that, I mean, the way it all started was that every year at SMSU, the librarians take those books out of circulation and they put brown wrapping paper on them, and then they just write across them the reason that they were banned, for whatever, witchcraft or glorifying this or homosexuality or whatever it is. And so because I'm in the performing arts, and we have people who like to perform, I thought it would be great if we could get together and people could read sections of the book and maybe get people interested in looking at them further or being surprised by what they are, because I think that we look at books now and go, that book is banned or was banned or challenged, and we don't even remember that. And so I think that that's one of the things that was really interesting to watch people listening. And then when the slide would come up, because it was a PowerPoint, when the slide would come up and they would say, this is from The Grapes of Wrath, people would be surprised because they think of it as a mainstay in literature, or To Kill a Mockingbird, which of course a lot of people know was banned at one point. Right, but we forget that it was banned. And that was really interesting. And then going on those challenge books and all the things that people have looked at. I mean, the Bible has been challenged and banned. It's strange things like that. And so I think just the fact that none of the books seem to be out of people's reach to be challenged for some reason. I mean, we've got children's books on the list, and we've got, young adult fiction, things, or nonfiction. I mean, things that people are gravitating towards that are being challenged, which I think is difficult.
Well, and of course, the environment in which many books are challenged is, of course, your environment, John, because it's often in schools where there will be a parent or someone in the community who understands that a given book is in the schools, and they may take a section or two, because it strikes me that often people say, sections are taken out of context, because there may be a page or two in a much larger book that is really the source of the problem or the challenge for many people.
And I'll have to say that in my school district, really very, very few instances anything like that happen, and I'm not sure why that is, because we're a school, we're a community. How come people aren't crabbing about what we're teaching? Yeah. But it's one of those things where we get to celebrate part of what makes America great by saying there's this freedom.
Sure, because The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, of course, shows up on many examples of a book that is banned or has been banned at various times or challenged at various times. To Kill a Mockingbird is another one you mentioned, and there are a variety of reasons why they may be banned, but of course it also is fascinating to see people sit down and say, oh really? This is a great book. Why would somebody not want to have this?
The Grapes of Wrath was banned or challenged in the area of the country where it was set. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it was challenged in California. It was set in California, and as I recall, there were some concerns about how is this depiction of agricultural workers and agricultural employers negative, and therefore we shouldn't be talking about it. So some of this becomes very contextual to a given time.
Well, and the Laura Ingalls Wilder Award now in Chicago has changed what they were talking about it, and they're going to change the name of it because of the way that she portrayed Native Americans and African Americans in the books, and so now they're taking her name off of the awards. So we're like losing some of our history because we're taking those things away, trying to sugarcoat them, which we can't. Otherwise, we're not going to learn from it.
Well, the other thing, as I think about banned books or challenged books, it strikes me that a lot of the books that we think of as banned or challenged were, for the most part, they're regarded as very, very good books. I mean, these were not books that were disregarded at the time. They were regarded as important books. And of course, some of these also, they really stand the test of time. Grapes of Wrath. And that's what I always wrestle with when I look at a list to say, okay, what are people going to think of this book 20, 30, 40 years from now?
Yeah.
What do you think, John? Is there a way to kind of get a sense of that, of what's going to stand the test of time on a great list of books?
Reading is such a personal thing for me that there are lists that come out that say Winesburg, Ohio is a great book, and I will never pick that book up again ever. I think it's people who are going to keep books alive, both as individuals and as groups. I don't know if I've got a great answer for you on that one, other than to say that good books will stand the test of time, and even some bad books will.
I remember when I was looking at this list, I saw that A Separate Peace by John Knowles was on the list. And I remember reading that in high school and thought it was a wonderful book. But I don't think I've looked at it since, and I thought, oh, how interesting. 1961 that came out, it's on the list, and I'm sure it's still being taught.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep, and what isn't on the list, and of course that's the great conversation, and that's the way that adults read. We read and we talk about it, and again, that's what we hopefully do in school, is give kids a chance to recommend a book to a friend, and then they pass on a great idea to someone else, and then they pass it on. Or we have an argument on why this was a good book. I was arguing with my entire 8th grade class about Romeo and Juliet for about 4.5 weeks. They were convinced it was not a great read, and I had a different opinion.
So over the course of 4.5 weeks, did some of them move in your direction?
I don't think so. They liked the Haley Steinfeld version of it, which was totally hacked up. The language was changed. It was made much more understandable. Of course, I hate stuff like that. And they loved that version of the movie, and I just kind of held my nose the whole time and could not wait to get to the text.
But I think we also approach books very differently as we age too. Like people who may have to read The Great Gatsby in high school and don't like it at all, but I've heard people say when they come back to it at age 50, they read it very differently.
For sure.
Sheila?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, we talked about the Hatchet series. I think those series are really, really important. And I think some of those books you can keep reading over and over because you love them. We have 2 different collections of the Harry Potter books, and they're all worn, because all 5 of my kids read them all the time, and they're all, which book are you on, which book are you on, and they're all, so sometimes those books, not just to revisit it because we didn't like it, but to keep revisiting it because we do like, and we keep reading the same book over and over.
And that's one of the other things that we've discovered about reading, is that rereading is really important. It's tough to test on it, it's tough to hold a kid accountable for rereading something, but we know that as adults, we reread all the time. And so how do we give our kids a chance to do that in school? That we use the Accelerated Reader program at our school, and once a kid gets 100% of his or her goal, I say one of your options is to go back and reread something that you've already read. Why not? I mean, the 2 books that I pulled out for the summer, Boxcar Children, which I've been reading since I was 8, and I'm almost done with it, and a great book called The Mad Scientist Club, a collection of short stories from Boy's life. And I bet you I've read that thing 20 times. Yeah. We reread. Yeah. So how do we do that in school so that kids know it's okay to reread, and when you read it the 5th time, you're going to get something more out of it?
Or take the time with a book where you may read it on a slower pace.
Yeah.
But take the time so you have a chapter here and a chapter there, and let that sink in, because some books are intense enough that you may want to set it aside and take a look at it, because that's another way. It's a little bit like rereading, but it's more of a thoughtful read as opposed to chasing through it.
As opposed to me saying, this is the book that you will love, and this is the schedule that on which you will love it.
I think that's true. When I was in high school, I read To Kill a Mockingbird, and then when I directed it a couple of years ago, I reread it over the summer, and it had a totally different, I just devoured it. I was so excited about, as opposed to read this chapter by this date, read this chapter by this, kind of that systematic kind of feel, and then we'll discuss it. But it was on me. I'm the one who had to patrol myself as to how fast I read or how slow, and then having the movie and everything like that, it just enhanced the whole experience. No, I mean, I devoured it because I wanted to read it, but it was so exciting to rediscover it. I think that's the rediscovering was really exciting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and I know rediscovery is great. I know, John, you and I talked about this before we started recording, that's a book that you'd love to teach, but there's somebody else teaching it in your school, so sometimes within a given school, you might, right?
Oh, yes. It's when West Central and Hoffman Kensington came together, it's a great teacher, Deanne Kennedy, who had possession of To Kill a Mockingbird. And the one argument that I had with her was, I said, I would like to teach To Kill a Mockingbird, and she said, no, you won't. And she had seniority, and so haven't gotten my fingers on it yet.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like in the world of theater, there may be great shows you've always wanted to do, right?
Right. Yeah, and for many reasons, you don't have the cast. I mean, I would love to do Fences, but in Southwest Minnesota, and all African-American cast is almost impossible.
Right. Yeah, so there are those challenges also about place and books. Because as I looked at some of the lists, and some of these are, there's rural stories, there's urban stories, there's a mix of things on there. And I think that's another thing about how we view this list or any list of books to get the discussion going. I'm curious, as you looked at the list, what are some of the books that you thought would have been on here but weren't? And some people have talked about William Faulkner, for example, and there's no Faulkner on the list. So whether someone loves William Faulkner or doesn't.
Personally.
Yeah, because I remember reading Light in August in high school and found it very difficult to get through it, but reading a short story, short stories I loved. So there's a lot of difference there in people thinking, well, this author should be there or there. But it's really America's most loved books, not necessarily America's most critically acclaimed books, right?
And of course, the one that sticks out for me is The Scarlet Letter. And that was introduced to me by Hubert Anderson in my 11th grade English class at Hopkins Eisenhower High School. And it was an assignment, but he treated us like adults. You know, we discussed it. There were very few tests, and he really turned it into a story that I wanted to follow. And I've gotten a chance to teach it a few times. And of course, I went through the list twice because at my age, I thought, well, I must have missed it. It's got to be here, and it's not.
What are some of the great books that you've always wanted to read that you maybe saw on the list, but you haven't gotten to them? Because I ran across a quote the other day, and it was a quote from Mark Twain. Okay, all right, and this was in a speech to the dinner of the 19th Century Club in 1900, and he was talking about Paradise Lost and how many people hadn't really heard of Paradise Lost, and he was referring to a man named Professor Winchester, and he said about Paradise Lost, he said, "It's a classic, just as Professor Winchester says, and it meets his definition of a classic, something that everybody wants to have read and nobody wants to read."
You know, I watched the special where they introduced all the books, and it was like being a kid in a candy store. I kept thinking, oh yeah, that one looks good. Oh, that one looks good. I wish I could remember more titles. I really do wish that I had read the Twilight books just so that when I'm making fun of kids for reading it, I really know what I'm talking about. And then there was also a Nicholas Sparks book on there, and the gals in my class just love Nicholas Sparks. And so I really should read one of those also just so that I can make fun intelligently.
And of course, Nicholas Sparks, I saw you light up on that one, Sheila.
Yes, because he writes for girls. We love Nicholas Sparks, yes, all the romanticism.
And I have it in my class, I have the girls come up with a list of the 10 books that they're sure guys will not read. They have to give a short report and say, this is why we like it, and this is why you should like it. And the guys do the same thing. And so I actually had one gentleman accept the challenge and read a Nicholas Sparks book this year.
Yes.
So that was fun.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah. You know, I also think, as I look at this books, of course, I think so many of our ideas of literature and what's on the list is sometimes shaped by film. Getting back to Kill a Mockingbird, of course, that people think of the great performance of Gregory Peck's career was To Kill a Mockingbird. And when I was looking at this list, I noticed, for example, Frank Herbert's Dune is on the list. And I could not think of a more dramatic example of To Kill a Mockingbird, a movie that lasted forever and is always seen. Right. And Dune, when it came out, and probably since, is a film that almost no one seems to want to watch.
Right.
So I think our perceptions of literature and of these books, it's largely shaped by also what we've seen in film.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think came to Kill a Mockingbird because of the film.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I think that, you know, with To Kill a Mockingbird, I mean, it's such a mainstay, but the film is very different than the book, you know. And so to look at that and go, this is that. You have to read the book to get the full story.
Yeah, and I think, or as you said, John, going back and rereading. Because with films, people will say, "Oh, I hadn't noticed that before. I did not see that the first time I saw the film."
And someone else is touching that. You know, when you do film, it's like all the Harry Potter. I mean, somebody else has touched that besides J.K. Rowling. There's another person whose interpretation is on, and then you have all the filmmakers and think it's not the same as the book. People always say the book is better. The book is better.
Yeah.
You know, because we can't challenge the imagination.
Yeah, or the opening scene of a book might have several pages of a description of a room.
Yes.
Yeah, whereas, and I think of a Clive Cussler adaptation where the opening credits, it's a slow pan of the entire room. So it has sort of the feel, and you're soaking in the description, but in a book that would be several pages of description and your mind is carrying you through that moment.
With To Kill a Mockingbird, whatever I've done last, if I've watched the film is better. Then when I read the book is better.
Well, the opening of To Kill a Mockingbird is enchanting.
Yeah.
It's absolutely enchanting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sheila, you have a perspective on this because I know you also teach classes on film, film and literature, and specifically on baseball, which I know is a shared interest of ours.
Which is very interesting because in Field of Dreams, there's a whole scene about banning books
There is.
in the
That's
gym.
right.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
right, the fictional version of
J.D. Salinger, essentially.
Salinger, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, someone who sort of stirred people up. And as I think about banned books, or I think about high school literature, that's a whole other part of, I think, what some people talk about with banned books is that there are occasionally those rebellious characters, like in Holden Caulfield in Catcher in the Rye, or there's rebellious characters about, well, I'm not sure we want to have this book taught because, oh, I don't know if we want somebody
Getting
that
ideas.
causing that much trouble,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, and most of the time we've got a kid who's pretty close to that sitting back there in the back corner of the classroom. So we don't even need to read it because we've got him in our school.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of those kids. And I think with baseball and film, I'm sure you've seen a lot of examples there of great books, sort of brought to life. And in the case of Field of Dreams, that was the Iowa Baseball Confederacy by W.P. Kinsella, which again has characters that aren't in the film, and you get a very different impression from that book.
And Eight Men Out was based on a book too. They're all over the place. I mean, 61 is really Billy Crystal's love of him missing his father, and it's kind of his love song to baseball. And it's not directly about the story, but the story is what influenced his book, which influenced the film.
And we should probably just clarify too, I don't know if I mentioned the website, but for folks who want to look this up, the website is pbs.org/Great American Read, so that's where people would go. And I mean, it's too bad, I don't remember seeing a baseball book on the
too
list.
bad.
But again, this is what people think, oh, this is a great book, and perhaps the Iowa Baseball Confederacy is one that people would put on that list.
But you can read more books than what are on the list.
Yes.
What?
Yeah. Well, and also too that the book have this is about novels and great fiction, whether they're English authors or whether they're that there are authors. We should mention too, it's not all American authors on the list because we do have a number of authors who are from other countries, but these are ones that Americans have found them great moving. I think Don Quixote, for example, is on the list.
And Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, Pride and Prejudice.
Marquez is on there. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, to tell you the truth, I haven't read that, but there was a short story, which the title is escaping me now, "The Man with the Enormous Wings,"
Oh, okay.
by Gabriel Marquez, which is a phenomenal short story, and so I was just, and we're trying at our school. We used to have a class called World Literature, which was really European literature, and we're trying to do a multicultural literature, really trying to draw from all of the great literature all over the world, including the stuff that's right next door that is not written by a dead white guy.
Yeah. And how was that? How was that working? I mean, tell me, that sounds like an interesting direction for you. Has it been exciting? And tell me about that.
Well, it's my colleagues in the high school who are really guiding that. We had a textbook that was at the school when I got there in 1985 as our world literature text. So you can tell that it was way out of date. And there has been just such a rise in authors who don't fit the white guy stereotype. And thank God for that. And so we're drawing in novels and short stories from all over the world to let our kids know there's a lot more out there than you can see in Grant County.
Yeah, Sheila?
No, I think that's excellent. In the in the theater world too, there's such a diverse mix of playwrights out there. I mean, we're getting stories from all over and from lots of different time spans and from nationalities and orientations. It's really, really exciting.
Yeah. We have about just a couple minutes left in the show, and I'd like to wrap up with a look at advice people would have as we look at theater and as we look at literature for kids, of how to really engage young people in reading and in theater and the literature. So, John, I'd like to start with you. I mean, you touched on this at the beginning, but thoughts for our viewers?
I'll tell you what, get a book that you can handle, get a book that you like. From what we know, if we can get a kid to read something, it will hopefully lead to another thing and to another. And they might not be reading the stuff that we want them to read, but as your ability grows and as you mature, you're not going to want to read the same, the Captain Underpants series until you're at age 40. You're going to end up reading A Prayer for Owen Meany. So read. period.
Yeah, both
Yes,
of,
it's
yeah,
good.
Yeah, both of which are on the list, as a matter of fact.
I think
Owen
John's
Meany's
right.
on
And
the
I
list.
think the idea of starting to read and then stopping that book because it doesn't interest you, I think that's great. And then picking up something else, trying something else if you don't like it. I think that's really important. I think sometimes kids, because we have 5 kids, you know, when they put something down, but they have to pick something else up and see if they're going to like that instead. And the Hatchet series, my youngest son really likes that first book, and he's not really a reader, but he read that, and now he's looking for more, and that's exciting.
Yeah, and that just intuitively seems to make a lot of sense to be able to say, wait a minute, this didn't grab me. Okay, something else will. Let's go there.
But it's okay. It's okay to not like something and to find something else.
And go to a library. The library in Elbow Lake is just fantastic. They know their books. It's an inviting place to be. They'll tell you what you might like.
This discussion could go on a long time, and it's been great fun, but we have to cut it off right here because we're out of time. John Drazel, Sheila Tabaka, thank you very much for joining us on Compass.
Thank you.
So that's it for this episode of Compass. For more information about the Great American Read, as we said, go to pbs.org/Great American Read. That's all for this episode of Compass. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.
The list is out and the voting has begun. It's time to select America's favorite book in the Great American Read. Come to the website and see our collection of America's 100 best-loved novels. Is your favorite on the list? Vote for your book, then share your choice so your friends and family can join in. The voting is open now. I'm Meredith Vieira. Help us choose America's favorite book on the Great American Read.